done this where I've gone 20 minutes in and then
I've done it with an entire episode before when we were doing my podcast from my closet with my best friend and I during the pandemic, and we did a whole episode and I just didn't record it.
Yeah.
It was great. It was
yeah,
really great.
it's the best moments when, like, you know, when you start off doing a podcast, and especially when, like, I get it if you're like a celebrity that wants to do a podcast, there's a little bit of leeway of like, okay, they're going to work their way into it. But then when you're a person like myself that comes from a broadcast degree, sports journalism, and then you go tell someone, yeah, you know, the button that's recorded.
Right. I didn't push the button.
And they're like, you have a degree, right? And I'm just like, not a good time. Not a good time to bring it up.
This is not, yeah.
I know we'll get into like different topics along the way, and if there's certain ones you're not comfortable with, just let me know. But
absolutely.
I do want to start off with Bob, just because this is something that, like, for people who know Bob, like yourself or Stamos. Now, I kind of mentioned it to Stamos. Stamos said I was overthinking it, but at the end of the episode, Bob asked me, he's like, what's your plans for the day? And I was just like, podcast's done, buddy. Like, you don't have to be friendly anymore. Like, you can just say like, bye. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to probably play some like PlayStation. And he was like, oh, that's really nice. I'm like, okay, he knows, like, I have a disability, but I'm not like 5 years old. But he was like treating me like, that's nice, Brian. Like, you enjoy playing that NHL game.
But yeah. I mean, Bob was always just really, like, he was one of those people who was always so busy, and yet he would take time out for everyone in his life while panicking about how busy he was. You know what I mean? But and it was because he was constantly, he loved what he did. He worked all the time. And then, you know, he also, like, he did so many things and just worried about and took care of so many people. He was a really good dude. I miss him for sure.
Yeah, I think what struck me, I get whatever way you want to word it, but like when I seen that he passed, I get it's weird because, like, you know, you'll go back and you'll see stuff on Instagram now, which I'm glad that you have this stuff. Like, you'll see like, here's what it was like growing up in the 80s. And like, if you show me that when I'm like 10 or 12, I have two older brothers. I'm like, wow, look at these losers growing up in the 80s. And now I look at it and I'm that loser, because there's kids out there now that are like,
for sure,
look at the 90s. And I'm just like, shut up.
Right. Like, the 80s were so much better. Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have kids and it's a trip.
I look at it and it's like very nostalgic. And like, I know I didn't grow up in the 80s. I grew up in the 90s, but like, I like that there's that whole time capsule. Like, there's shows that are about the 80s, and like, you see how cultures develop. But I think and sometimes, like, if you go talk to someone who grew up in the 80s or my brother, and like a celebrity passed away and you don't know who that celebrity was essentially. And then they're like, oh man, like, I can't believe and I'm like, yeah, it's life. Like, people pass. But like, then when I seen Bob passed, I was just like, all right, like, this is a guy that I remember coming home, and like, I've said it to Stamos as well, but we used to have like a blue Little Mermaid table that was way too big.
Right.
Or like or too small, and I was too big, but like, I used it and I would sit and watch Full House. Yeah. And then on Friday nights or Saturday nights, it'd be like AFE would come on, and your friends would be like, hey, do you want to do something? I'm like, no, like, Saget's on.
I'm watching,
like,
right. Watching my show.
Yeah. And then
the days of like appointment TV too, when you would clear a Friday night and go watch a show and do all that, you know, it's so different now. And I think like that really almost doesn't exist now, because it's not, there aren't a lot of shows that are like Friday night, everyone's watching it. It's not network TV like it used to be. So I think we like existed in this really wonderful time of that sort of nostalgia that everyone shares. You know, now it's like everyone kind of is in their own separate little niche of whatever streaming they're watching. But like, then it was, you know, you had however many channels. And so whatever was on ABC on a Friday night, like, chances are everyone was watching it. And so it's crazy to think that like that many people had that experience.
I love panic watching, where it's almost like, not like in a mean way, but it's almost like on a Friday night when there's TGIF, or like, you know, on a Saturday afternoon, and you're out playing, like, because I am Canadian, so it's like ball hockey. And next minute it's just like, guys, what time is it? It's like, oh, it's 3:30. I'm like, holy fuck, we have to pack up. It's like, why?
We have to run. We've got to go. We've got to go. Right. Yeah.
Boy Meets World is on. I don't want to miss it. And then like, and then when I get older, I'm just still like, okay. And then then there was a whole time frame where people would watch Friends. Like I have people who loved Friends, and I would hate it because I'm just like, you promised we were playing hide and seek. It's like, yeah, but it's the finale of Friends. Now, I've watched it as I got older, and I feel bad for 10-year-old Brian because I'm like, okay, you were kind of mean to your friends because now that you've watched Friends, you understand that. But like, that's how I felt with How I Met Your Mother. And then like hearing Bob,
it was so crazy, like Bob being on How I Met Your Mother, and so many people like just knew immediately. They were like, oh, it's Bob's voice. Like he has such a distinct, recognizable voice. And yeah, you know, it's funny. Friends actually shot on our set on Stage 24 when we left Warner Brothers, when Full House wrapped the first time, we wrapped and Friends moved in to our set after us and shot there for their thing. And I actually have never seen an episode of Friends, so I'm like one of those like handful of people that's never watched it. Yeah.
Feel like that's something that you should put on your list. Like, you know, I'm
not a sitcom person. I don't watch a lot of sitcoms. I actually don't watch a lot of TV. Like I had foot surgery. I know. I had foot surgery like in December, and I'd say I've probably watched, I don't know, maybe 12 hours or less of televisions in that month's time. Like I don't watch TV very often. If I do, it's like a documentary series that I binge all 4 episodes at once or something.
Okay. So like you're not like a person that would go back and like rewatch yourself?
I never watched it. No, I've never really watched Full House. I don't like watching myself. Even like to this day, I'll watch when I'm on set and doing it. I'll watch it, make sure everything looks good, and that, you know, people are happy with takes, or if it's something that I, you know, want to try again or whatever. But I don't love watching myself. There are some people that do, and a lot of people that just do not. It is not. I'm too critical, and I can't. It's hard for me to be objective to the whole thing and not only see the stupid little things that like are in my own head. You know what I mean? And you're like, no one else is seeing that. Right. But
I feel the same way with podcasting. Like when people like talk about podcasting, I can put out episodes, don't listen to my own. And they're like, well, like, is that like good? I'm just still like, well, yeah, like if I can take criticism, if someone's like, you could improve on this, I'm like, that's fine.
But like it's not that I don't think I screw it up, right? It's just
I just don't want to sit there and over criticize where it's like, oh, I heard myself breathe, and they're just like, you're allowed to breathe. I'm like, no, not allowed to breathe.
And it's true, you know, when I was a kid too, it was, you know, everybody that was my age was watching that show, and it was like, I did it 3 weeks ago. You know what I mean? Like I already lived that experience. I did it. I know how the show turns out. Like I'm over it. I'm done. I've moved on to the next thing. So, you know, I was like, why would I want to watch it again? I already know. I read that script. Like, you know, I know what happens. And people always were like, but you're a kid. Like, weren't you so excited to see yourself on TV? And I was like, not really. Like, I just was never like, thought it was that
big a deal.
I was never like, oh, wow, I'm on TV. It was like, well, it's just what I do and I love it and it's fun. So.
I like that response better than like, you know, like I was on TV and like, yes, everyone bowed down to me. And I was like, you better bow down to me. Like, God.
Yeah, I definitely was like, it's what I do. It's what I love doing. But like, it's just a piece of me, you know?
No, it's fair. Like, I want to ask you, because I know at a young age, like you were in dance and ballet. So like, we can get in like, I know people kind of like a linear conversation, but I tell people like with conversations, you don't sit down to your friend and say, all right, like, let's talk about how you started your day. Like, no, you just go wherever, right? But I wanted to start there because dance and ballet at 3. So like, what brought you necessarily into acting? Because I know I was in bowling at a young age. I thought I was going to be like more of a sports guy. But then like people were like, Tobin, just shut your goddamn mouth. I'm like, I'm going to use my mouth one day for good. I don't know if it has got there yet, but yeah.
You know, I just loved performing. I loved dancing. I loved making people laugh, even when I was little. Like, I just liked that energy. And so, you know, as a little kid at like 3 or 4, I wanted to dance and take tap and do all these things. And my mom saw how much I enjoyed performing and that I really wanted to do more. And I wanted to, I was like, I want to be on TV. I want to do those things. And, you know, my parents weren't connected to the business. They didn't think anything of it. So it just sort of, it was like a real snowball effect in that it started as like something very small and then like a little bit here and there and some print ads and then a couple commercials. And then it was, you know, and then the ball just kept rolling and it's kind of continued ever since.
So like, yeah, like when you mentioned, of course, like, you know, with anything, you get a ball rolling, you start small and then you get bigger and bigger. But like when you first landed, say, Full House,
and
then you've seen it go into, I think it's like I believe it's 7 or 8 seasons.
8
But like,
seasons, yeah.
so like, do you at that point, like, I know it's still young, but when you look back now, we're like, I guess when you first got the role, you're kind of like, great, like I got a gig, I got a job. But
I didn't even, I never auditioned for Full House. I had done a guest appearance on another show that was by the same producers, and they had Full House in development at the time.
Okay.
And so I had never, I never auditioned for the show, and I just kind of wound up doing it. I was barely 5. So for me, like, it wasn't really a lot of thought. It was just, I enjoy doing this right now. Like, this is the, I wasn't like, my career, or that, it was like, this is fun.
At 5-year-old walking into the room. All right, guys, this is where I see my career going. They're like, you're 5, right. Relax.
Right. So, it wasn't quite like that, but I think as the show grew over the years and it became, where it was like, I like going to the mall, everybody would recognize me, things like that. That's when it was like, oh yeah, this is kind of a big deal. Because again, for me, I went to public school. I would go to school in the morning and then I'd go to work in the afternoon, just because where we lived and driving back and forth with traffic and everything. And I was really grateful for that, because it meant that I sort of got to have like a normal experience in some ways, of just a regular outside of LA Hollywood life of just a normal elementary school kid. Yeah. So that there was a balance to it as I went along. And but I don't think you ever really, even to this day, like, I'll go to another country, or I hear people who I have great respect for, people like that I really admire, who maybe aren't in entertainment, but are, either politicians or speakers or authors or whatever, and from all over the world. And they'll be like, oh my gosh, my sister and I watched your show in Saudi Arabia growing up, or in Japan, like, the show still airs in cabs. We were in Japan, and the show pops on the little screens in the TV, in the taxi cabs. You just don't understand until you're like somewhere else in the world, or someone tells you that they, emigrated to the US and watched Full House with their family, and that's how they learned English. Like, there's so many instances of that, and it's really cool. And it's still, to this day, like, I live a pretty normal life. My life is quiet, and I kind of like it that way, other than like what I do for a living. But it's my life is normal, and I like it that way. And sometimes I forget, like, oh, that's right, like, other people know who I am. You know what I mean? It's just and it also has been my entire life. Like, I never really could remember a life outside of being in entertainment as a kid. So this has just always been what it's been,
Yeah. Now, I know I want to talk to you a little bit, like, about the normalcy of life. Like, I know when you said you go to school just like a normal kid, and when you go to school like a normal kid, now it's a little bit somewhat of a two-way sword here, because everyone gets bullied in some case.
Oh yeah.
Right. But like, it's different for, I feel like, a normal kid when they get bullied, because it's like a specific thing of like that day of like, for me, it was always like I had a birthmark or the big ears. And I was just like, when you're younger, you're like,
and all right, anything. Yeah, kids it's your name rhymes with, or you're saying, like, stupid bad shit that's not, you're like, this doesn't even matter. What do you do? And like, as a kid though, you're like, this is so embarrassing. And then you look at it, you're like, oh my God, they were really stretching for that one to even have anything to make fun of. But it definitely, I was not the normal kid. I wished for times I could probably blend into a wall, because as much as I lived a quote unquote normal life, half the time, I definitely was not a normal kid in the classroom to them.
So like, what would be, and I know probably like thinking back, but what's one that you think, like, because being bullied, like something that really stuck, like a comment or something, you look back at it now and you're like, it's funny. But
it was always, they would make fun about, they would make fun of stuff on the show. So they would like make fun of like something that Stephanie did on the show. And as I got older, I remember towards like middle school and high school, when people would be like, oh, and how rude or this and that. And I was like, I mean, you watched it, I didn't, I was like, And it was true. I was like, you watched the show. Like, obviously, you know it well enough to know what the storyline was from last Friday to make fun of me in class on Monday about it. So, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what
like. What do you want me to say to that?
Like, right. I was like, okay, yeah. And you just kind of learned that, like, and it also was like, they weren't necessarily making fun of me. They're making fun of this character that I am. And like, I think it was more the assumptions that I was, because I was famous before I even met people at school or in class or whatever, and teachers too. I mean, I had teachers that were awful to me. But you have this, people would have this preconceived notion that you're going to come into class thinking that you're hot shit. And I was like, that's not who I am. So they're expecting to meet that person. And then when you come in and you're like, I'm just kind of quiet and like wanting to blend in and like, I don't quite know the lay of the land yet. Then they're like, oh, see, she is quiet and standoffish. She thinks she's, you know what I mean? And you're like, that's not it. Like, so, that was always the thing, was I think it was more that people thought that I was going, they expected me to be really impressed with the fact that I was on TV and I wasn't, and they were, you know what I mean? And it was like this weird, they were like, but don't you think you're hot shit? And I was like, no, I don't. I just want to go to school.
The only, like, I can't necessarily relate to it full context, but like a story that I remember, like that, I guess it kind of relates. Now you can be like, no, I don't relate at all. But like, I'm a big Detroit Red Wings fan. So the year that they went to the Cup, like, when you pick a team, you know that you're getting criticized.
Dave Coulier is a huge Red Wings fan. I mean,
we'll talk about Coulier. We'll talk, but like, it's like, I remember being a Detroit Red Wings fan, and like the year prior, or like you always get bullied because it's just like your team gets eliminated in the playoffs.
Right, your team sucks.
You're going to school like, fuck, like I gotta go endure Detroit sucks or whatever. And I remember I was like, you know what? I went in one year and I was like, you know what? I'm just not gonna like indulge in it. So like I'd have people be like, Red Wings suck. I'm like, yeah, they're pretty bad. And I know they're not, but I'm just like,
but you're like, what? Yeah. I always say it takes two people to have an argument, and it's like one person arguing and yelling is just a crazy person. Two people doing it is an argument. One person doing it is just by themselves yelling. You know what I mean? So like you just walk away and you give them nothing to.
Well, that's what I used to do.
There's nothing to go back and forth with, and then they get bored of it.
They used to just be like, so it was like playoffs, and then they'd be like, do you think Anaheim's going to put out Detroit? And I'm like, well, Anaheim got a good team, I guess. And then like they win the Cup that year, and I'm just like, in my mind, because I'm still young, I'm like, man, all this time I just had to avoid the confrontation and they'll win every year.
Right. Obviously, I've just been wanting it too bad. Right.
Yeah. And then the next year they lose to Pittsburgh, and like some guy in my class drives by my house at 12 and starts bumping the horn. I'm like, oh, we're back. I'm like, okay, we're back.
We're back.
Yeah. But I mean, it's the fun of it. It's like no one gets really hurt. It's a sports team. Like it's not like you live and die by it. But
kids can be pretty cool, but cruel. Excuse me.
They can be cool and cruel.
They can be both. And I will say though that like so much of the resilience I think that I have now came from learning how to have to be really secure in myself, regardless of what everyone else in the room thought. You know what I mean? Like I had to really know and like me. And that wasn't always easy, but like as I've gotten older, I look back on all those times that maybe kids were making fun of me or teasing me, or just school life was difficult, which it is for all of us.
Yeah.
That I look at it and I go, oh, I'm so glad though, because that, like, had I not had any of that, it tests your ability to bounce back and to like learn how to let things slide and learn what matters and what doesn't. And also, to like learn what to take into consideration from other people. Because a lot of times people are like, you can say anything you want to me. Like, I literally means nothing, So I tell my kids that too, like with people on the internet, I'm like, they could say, do they know you? Do they know, like, they could say you're blue and an alien and have 3 heads and whatever. Like, are you going to get upset about that? Well, no. I was like, right, because it's not in anywhere true. So, like, who cares?
Yeah.
You have to, like, it's learning how to be like that. And it's hard, I don't think I would want to grow up in today's business as a kid.
Yeah, that's what I was going to go to, because I was like, you know, the time frame now of like when you're looking at like, and again, we talked about like the different shape of TV and everything now.
Right.
Like you had to be really into a TV show to commit to, kind of form your schedule around it.
Right.
Now I find like I love that 70s show. I'm giving that 90s show a chance.
Right.
And I like it, but like you go online and you read people like kind of downgrade or criticize. Like I don't know how old these people are. They're probably like 12, 13. Now,
right.
Ashton Kutcher and them wasn't 12 and 13 playing like the roles they are. But
Right.
The way social media is, it's instant, it's in real time. And I look at it and like they criticize a character named Ozzy. Now, some people criticize him just because they're like, he's not funny, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you know what? That's fair if you think that. But it's like, there's still a person on that role that like in 3 or 4 seasons, if they get written out because of your comments, you don't know. Like, you don't,
I think too, it's the thing now just with social media in general that like we all find that it's real easy to say things and to go off on a tirade at something or someone that isn't right directly in front of you in a way that you never would criticize or talk about them or a show you like or what someone wore or whatever in a way that you would do to their face. And you know, now it's like that's what people do for entertainment online is just shred each other apart. I mean, it's entire platforms, and unfortunately it's not like, you know, oh, if you're a terrible person, you're into it. It's just like a weird human nature thing that we all are like, ooh, that's terrible. I want to keep doing that. You know what I mean? And now, like, I wouldn't want to be one of those kids that had to grow up with everyone's comments about me being online and everywhere and omnipresent and everyone paying attention to it. You know what I mean? Like, it's bad enough when it's just, you know, the kids in your class and you're getting shit and people are making fun of you and whatever, or you do something stupid and people pay attention. Like now it's just, it's really unfortunate. I think it's really sad. I mean, I don't see how you grow up in this business anymore and not really, really have it, sort of tear you apart at a much earlier age.
I know you say like you don't watch a lot of like sitcoms, but you do watch like documentaries. Now you might have seen it, and feel free to say you haven't. Like it's not a shot at anyone, but like I grew up with like again with Full House and stuff. But it's like I remember kind of diving into like Hannah Montana, Wizards of Waverly Place. Now I haven't watched Wizards, but like Selena, like seeing like the whole documentary on Selena, like I haven't watched it, but I've seen clips.
Some of those, and I think it's sort of always been that way, like the Disney Kids, that TV show to like full on pop star direction. Like that's what they do. That's what they set these kids up to be. It's a machine. Yeah. And you know, there are parents who don't always have the purest of intentions that get their kids involved in it. And you know, I think that type of fame and popularity, I think it just sort of it breeds inherently problematic things into parent-child relationships. If the parent wants it more, like my parents had nothing to do with this business. We're always like, if you love it, great. If you start hating this, like,
just go.
You know, it's not it wasn't that it was their dream, or you know, they were like, great, that's fine. This is not our dream. This is what you love to do. But you see so many kids, particularly in some of those like Disney, Nickelodeon, like type environments where they just really, and it's every free moment, every single thing. And now, you know, it's like they're constantly doing a media thing or a social media tour or a live or a this or that. And if you're not doing that and online and promoting and streaming and broadcasting every bit of yourself for public consumption, you're not engaged, and someone else is going to do it. Yeah. And get that coveted, you know, pop star, whatever. And I just think, it's like, I don't know how many times we have to see people really go off the rails from that kind of attention. Yeah. Before we're like, maybe this isn't great. You know what I mean? but I do think there's levels to it. And I think as time has gone on, it's just gotten so much more focused and intense for young people in this business. And even not in this business, just the social media landscape in general, then add on being on that kind of a show. It's a lot.
Yeah, like, I mean, just in like, I know in a celebrity's case, like I guess in a kind of a contrast, it's like growing up in the 90s being a kid and like, you know, being a celebrity compared to, you know, like you're looking like I will be open about it and say like when Bieber first came out, it was kind of like, okay, like I guess I like some of these tunes, but it's like whatever. But like now I enjoy Bieber. Like there are moments that I'm just like he's around my age, but at the same point, it was like when he was like 16 or 17 doing crazy shit or getting in.
Right.
I mean, so was I, but here I am on social media going, man, Bieber's a tool. But it's like, so are you, right?
So
like,
are you, right? All of us. I mean, I think, you know, I don't envy any of the young people in this business today trying to figure out who the hell they are.
Yeah.
While doing it in such an insanely public way. Like it's
hard to do. Like, you know what? Like I'm a podcaster and I'll see some fellow podcasters that always go live and I'm just like, that's great. And if you're really into it, awesome. But like, I'm not going to go do a live just for the sense of doing a goddamn live.
I'm terrible at it. Social media for me is I realize my age. That's what I'll say. I realize that I just turned 41. I realized just how
happy
41
belated. Happy belated.
I am. Thank you.
Yeah.
When I'm like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. And I see my kids who, you know, and I was reading this whole article about Gen Z and Snapchatting pictures of the ceiling and this and that. That to people my age and our age is like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
But that's just what it is. And like, it's such a different frame of mind and it feels like it's moving so quickly that for me is the thing where I go, yeah, I'm the old person that's like on my way out with Instagram and like TikTok is too much work. And I have a life. I have things I have to do and I can't spend 20 minutes editing every video of every moment of my life.
Yeah. I will dive into that a little bit with like, I know when I was in university and I used to get really like, and you know, people are going to be like a little bit, I guess, I hope no one cancels me over it. I doubt it because why would they? But it's like, I remember being like 20 odd and like you'd start texting your friends and you're just like, when you don't get that instant reply, you're just like, guess I mean nothing to this person.
Right,
okay. And then
it's that teenage sort of the world revolves around me. Obviously no one else has anything going on. I need all of the attention. Like, and it's hard. My daughters are 14 and 12 and look, like being a parent and looking at them and going like, what is wrong with you? And you're like, oh, there's like a whole part of your brain that hasn't quite figured it out yet, but it's so hard to think back to when you were the person that didn't have that part. That it seems entirely unrelatable and that this young person in front of you must obviously be broken. And then you're like, oh no, wait, I think that was all of us. We were all pretty well broken. And then we kind of figured it out.
I would just be like, you know, sending text message. Like I would be like, I don't know if the song Halsey 3 a.m. really rings in my ear because I'm just like, I was probably like 2 or 3 in the morning just sending text to people being like, if someone replies, great. If no one replies and it's like 7 in the morning, at least I have someone to talk to that day. But then
it's
now it's like when I get a text, I'm like, oh goody, someone sent me a text. But at the same time, like, dude, I'm fucking playing Mario Kart. Can you fucking wait? And then there's just it's like, no, you sent me a message earlier that day.
We all want immediate gratification now, you know? And I think it's changed the way we watch TV, sort of talking about like, you know, we want to binge shows. Now, if there's an HBO show that comes out, you know, once a week, we're like, I have to wait a week. But, you know, it seems so outrageous, but it's all of our attention spans and the way that we kind of operate in the world has shifted. And, you know, I guess I'm finally realizing that generational gap that happens when you're old enough to be like, I'm glad it was the way it was when I was young. You know what I mean? Your kids go, you're old. Like that's when you know, yes, I finally arrived at middle age.
That's it. Like you go on like those apps and you see like some people making like comedy bits about like you were born in 19. I'm like, hold on now. But I had a Christmas, so I have it like if I can put this the right way. So all this is Detroit stuff here.
Oh,
but
nice.
At Christmas time, I have like the Sears wish books that they used to come out with.
Oh my gosh.
And I showed my niece And she was like, so how does that work again? I'm just like, oh, like
Right.
we
Where
would
do you
circle
click
it.
on the?
Yeah, we would circle it
I
and
would
then make a
cut it
list.
out.
Yeah.
My mom still has them somewhere. The Sears wish book, man. That was
Yeah.
like, you could order anything out of the Sears catalog. And I would go to the toy section and I would cut out with like little safety scissors and glue before I could write, when I was like, 3, 4 years old, and would glue stick it on the page, like, so that, that Santa was very clear on what I wanted for Christmas.
I would just, like, when I was
now
younger,
my kids send me lists with like hyperlinks and I can just click on the link when I'm, to buy what I'm like, this is insane.
It was just like, I would mark it down of like, wrestlers, page 5, and then like you'd show it, and like, and then they'd be like, okay, now at the time there was like Walmart, Kmart, wherever, but like there's something to be said of if someone sends you, like my nephew, if he likes Toronto, and then you'll see like the black Toronto jersey, he just sends me a link and I'm like, done, boom,
done. Now that's it.
But like, I feel like, sadly, and people are going to be like, man, that sounds like such a weird way to say it, but like, I kind of do miss the aspect of him just giving me a list, me going through the list and being like, I'm going to Walmart. And then when you go to Walmart, you kind of see other things that you might like. Right. But
I still am a person. This is the old lady in me. I use a pen and paper. Like, I don't, I mean, I do write some notes and things on my phone, but like, if I have to remember something, I've got to write it down. I like to read actual books with pages.
Okay.
Because I don't know. It's where I realize I'm like slowly becoming the old lady who's going to go live in the woods by herself. Because I'm like, it's just this technology. I want a piece of paper that I can touch, or I like going to a store to shop, like, and be like, oh, actually that looks like them. Or I thought I wanted this, but actually I want that, whatever it is. Anyway, I'm old. I'm 41 now. And it's crazy to think that in just that short amount of time, where I started in this business and where I'm at now, and like the huge shift and change globally that's gone on. Yeah. And the fact that Full House and Fuller House have like continued on through all of that for me is insane.
Well, before we touch on Fuller House, because I do want to mention Fuller House and a couple more topics there, but like to kind of bring up your story, like, when you're saying about getting old and like whatnot, but like I remember, like, because I'm in Newfoundland now, but I went to school in Ottawa, and there was like there used to be a pub, and now they renamed the pub. But I went there with my friend one time recently, and I remember going to that pub when I was like 20 odd, and like I was kind of like the Arnold of like the Magic School Bus, where I'm like, oh no, like I should have stayed home today, but like I'm just like, we're kind of going away from campus, guys. This is not cool. Just relax. And then like now I look back and I'm like, yeah, you were fine. Like you were only like 2 blocks away, but I look at it now, older, and I seen like a whole bunch of girls walk in one time, and they're like, it's winter, and it was like they're just in dresses, and like the 20-year-old Brian would probably be like, good targets, like let's talk to them, let's
go talk to them.
But,
right.
Like the 28, 30-year-old was like, oh my god, it's like, do you got a jacket?
You need a coat. I'm too cold.
And my friend
yell
was
at my kids about taking jackets with them. You need a jacket. It's
my friend was just like, you're gonna ruin their night. I was just like, or they'll look back at it when they're 30 and just like, remember that guy?
Someone won't have pneumonia, right? Yeah, exactly. Like, it's your priorities change. Suddenly,
they
I go
probably
out
think
and
I'm like 55.
I want to sit down. Right.
Yeah. They'll be like, how old are you? I'll be like, I'm 30. They're like, oh, it's like, sure, we can hang out. I'm like get a jacket first. They'll be just be like, Brian, you're ruining this.
You can't go out in the cold like this.
Yeah. They'll be like, Brian, you had a shot with that girl, but you ruined it when you told her to get a jacket. I'm like, well, you know what? She'll probably go home.
I was worried.
And she's fine. I'm fine because now she's fine. It's like, you don't even know her, but like mentally, I'm feeling that she's
better.
Cold.
Right.
She needs a jacket. I want to talk to you about Fuller House too, because again, once Full House ends, it's been like quite some time since Fuller House. Now, we talked about the landscape changing. It's no longer sitting down watching it in terms of like scheduling your day. So like, tell me, number one, how did you essentially agree to it? Because I know there was some back and forth between the other ones. We won't, like, the twins that first they thought they were going to be there, and then they weren't, and then Stamos had to come out.
There was never any, I think, question that were going to be a part of it. I think the audience probably held out hope. We knew that like that's not what they do. It's not what they want to do, and it wasn't like because they hated us. They were just like, we don't act. We haven't acted since we were children. It would be like someone being like, remember that time you did a school play in kindergarten? Okay, we want you to come be in a TV show now. You'd be like, I don't do that anymore. That's not the same person.
Yeah.
So I think that was, people didn't quite get that they somehow, it was like a personal thing. And it never was. But yeah, I was actually in it from the beginning. Candace, Andrea, and myself, along with John Stamos and Jeff Franklin, the producer, executive producer and creator, and a couple other producers, we were going in and pitching it to ABC Family and Hulu and, all these different networks. And, it was funny because we knew that there was an audience for it, and people were like, well, I don't know. It was, and of course, years before reboots were a thing.
Yeah.
We were pitching it. So it took, a couple of years before the show was even on. And then we were still one of the first like successful reboot shows. So in the days of pitching this, people were like, I think people want to go back and watch the same show over again. And we were like, I think they might,
Yeah. If only they
turns out we were right. If only right. And so once we went and did all of these pitches, and one of the pitches we had, I think it might have been at Nickelodeon, and I was working like a regular job at the time. I was like, look, bills got to be paid. I got kids, like life. And I kind of moved on, and, I was like, fine, I'll keep pitching this. I'll, see where it goes. It was one of those, like, who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And there was this pitch to Nickelodeon. I couldn't leave my regular job that day. Some insanity happened and I had to stay. Candace and Andrea, I think, went to the old Nickelodeon building on, like, one's in Burbank and one's in Santa Monica. So, like, totally opposite sides of LA. John couldn't make, like, it was the worst pitch. Like, all the wheels fell off on this pitch at Nickelodeon, I guess. And then a couple months later, one of the executives that had been at Nickelodeon and heard that pitch and heard the idea had wound up moving over to Netflix.
Okay.
And I want to say Brian Grazer. I might be wrong on the last name. I feel really bad. But anyway, he went over to Netflix and was like, hey, you guys. So they're kind of pitching this like Full House reboot thing. And I think it might be. And they brought us in. And that was how we wound up at Netflix, was really from completely blowing it somewhere else and someone just hearing the idea. And when they made a move, being like, I think that's actually something that might work. And
especially in the landscape of like what Netflix is, right? Like,
right. And Netflix was looking, this was at the time they were really looking to kind of anchor their like family co-watchings that people could watch together. They had a lot of like House of Cards and that style of show, and then like kids cartoon shows, but there wasn't anything like
family related,
Fuller House. Right.
Yeah. And
so that was really how the show completely took off again. And it was then, I think, that people finally realized like just how popular the show was and was continuing to be. And even with Fuller House and what it was. And we were one of the first reboot shows that kind of did it a little bit differently, that followed some of the same characters and brought them back. Yeah. And, it was, I think, really well done. And it's something I was really proud of.
Well, I mean, you survived like, say, 1 or 2 seasons, right? Which is always like that threshold.
5. We did 5.
Well, no, like that's what I'm saying. Like,
right.
Because like, like the threshold now compared, and again, like I don't want to always go back to comparing it, but like now,
but it's
you do it.
You would have
a season,
Well, in the old days, God, just dated myself. I'm drinking tea also, by the way. What has happened? No, but in the original days of network television, a season would be 24 to 26 episodes.
Exactly, yeah.
And now a season of a show on Netflix is 10. Like 8, 10, 13 if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Usually around 10 to 12. And so you have like, and their analytics are like the whole way it's popular now is different. And so it's weird to think that like it's just such a change from how you used to be able to rate how popular something was. Now it's like it could be huge in a particular niche market and not necessarily be anywhere else, but really, really successful on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon or whatever. in its own little world. So
because I think it's just like the way I've said it to many people too, of like when you're watching stuff on Netflix and like you see 10 episodes, like it's great because it's like trying to build it to the consumer of how much you can watch, but like you still need, regardless of like way back when or now, like to kind of judge something on 10 episodes or a season, like you kind of let it develop. Like
you get like 2 seasons. I'm like, I need to see where this is going. Like, you know, like, and if you try and wrap it all up in the first season, I'm like, well,
no, it's not going to work. Like I remember on a whim at one time going to Walmart and I was binge watching, like, again, it's not to be mean, but it's like, you know, Friends, Full House, Boy Meets World, and I was like, I'm done. Like I've seen it enough.
That's it, right?
So like I was like, oh, there's How I Met Your Mother. And I didn't know anything about it. I just liked the title. And then there was Big Bang. And I think I kind of got into How I Met Your Mother first. But I think after the first season, I was like, I think I'm putting this away. I think this is a bad purchase. And then like I gave it like another bit of time. And it's one of my favorites. Big Bang, I think it was like a constant, like, tried it once. No. Tried it twice. No. And then the third time I was like, you got to at least get past season 2. And then when I got past season 2, I was like, all right, now we're bringing in Howard, we're bringing in Raj.
And I think you kind of, you know, it's hard as an actor and producer and director and stuff in the business now, because you know you don't have a very long time to capture the audience's interest, because they just don't have the attention span like they do anymore. So you have that first episode to hook. People aren't like, people aren't gonna come in, you know, and be like, I'll give it 2 or 3 episodes. They're like, no, I'm the first half hour and I'm done. And so, you know, you have very limited audience attention span, and you have to hook them like with something really great and then keep it that way. There's no longer the like sort of, you know, people freaked out on Game of Thrones when it's like, it's a filler episode. You're like, it's not a filler episode. It's just not every episode is a red wedding, you know, or something huge. Sometimes you got to kind of get from point A to point B. And I think in some ways we've lost the ability to follow that arc more gently. We want like, action, crazy finale, you know? It's like, it's a lot to keep up with.
I'm a big wrestling fan, so it's like when watching it, like when growing up, like you're still a kid, but watching it as a kid growing up, you're kind of like, all right, cool. Like who's coming out next? Who's coming in the Royal Rumble? Like, you know, like, cause there's no internet, you don't know. But now, like as an adult that's kind of keeps up with it, it's like you go online and you see people mad that a storyline is taking a year to develop. And then when that finally happens, they're the same people that will be like, oh my God, like that was worth it. I'm just like, but 3 months ago, you
didn't want to wait. Yeah, exactly.
So it's a waiting process. I do want to mention though, like I know you mentioned about your podcast, and I kind of dived into it a little bit. So number one, like what made you start the podcast? Tell us a little bit about what it was about. And then we're going to branch from that, because I do have questions for that as well.
Got it. Well, the podcast is called Never Thought I'd Say This, and we are actually wrapping up with our last little bit of episodes that are going to air this year. But it's with my friend Celia Behar, and she and I are best friends, and she also has 2 girls that are around the same age as my daughters, and we started the podcast like 6 years ago now or so. Wow. So it's been a while, and our kids were a lot younger. And it really came out of our ridiculous stories of parenting, of like things that you never thought you'd have to talk to another human being about, that you have to have a conversation with a kid about, like things that you can't eat or do, or like don't stick a fork in the toaster, you know, like stuff that you just kind of forget that doesn't come automatically pre-programmed. Absolutely, and then also the really funny stories and the really like scary, nerve-wracking ones that you face as a parent. And so it was this overarching comedy, parenting, best friends podcast. And we're wrapping that up now and sort of transitioning into another podcast that's going to be coming out with Celia and I with Comedy Store Records called This Friendship is Fucked. And it's going to be a little bit more comedy, friendship centered. We're not going to bring up our kids and all that, because now that they're in like middle school and high school, like their stories are not like funny. Oh, I left the snack. It's, you know, now it's like personal stuff. I'm like,
you don't want that.
That's not out there for
it's more, but it's more like when they're smaller and you get a story, like a case in point of if your parents, because this actually happened, but my parents one time when they left, they said like, whoever calls, like, don't let them know that we're gone. And I was like, got it. So then like my aunt calls And she's like, hey, it's like, is your mom around? I was like,
right.
No, where's she to? I can't tell you. And then it was like, literally, and then when I come home, my mom's like, well, I didn't mean literally. Like, she's like, if the cops called, why would you tell them?
You knew, right.
Yeah. And I was like, no, like I took you verbatim.
That's it.
What you said. Like it's literal. You told me.
My mom told me one time I would be grounded for life if I ever talked in class again. The next day I talked in class. I got my name on the board. I was like, this is it. Crying, sobbing. The teacher's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, you don't understand. I'm grounded for life. I'm never leaving my house, you know? And like, the teacher was like, I don't think that's actually true. But that's kids, right? And so like, just wild, funny stories. And then, there's no manual for parenting. So like talking about the real stuff, the things that are fun, the things that are not so fun, and giving our listeners and other parents out there a place to share their ridiculous, crazy, wild stories, their frustrations, and not be judged or feel like a bad parent for it, and to just, be like, yeah, this parenting shit is wild, and like, we're all doing our best, and we're all going to need therapy at some point. So let's just put that out there now. And that is what it is.
Well, like there is an image that I remember from grade 1, and it's not like, I don't know why it sticks with me, but I just think it's funny because similar to your story there, where it's like, I remember there was a girl named Allison, and she was crying for like some reason, and the teacher like just came over and she's like kind of like grabbed her and like not like mean, but just like enough to like put it together, like pull herself together, lady. And she was
that was like, what the teacher did to me. She was like, you're not going to be grounded for life. And I was like, but I am.
But she said to her, she's just like, if you cry now, you will have no tears later in life. I'm like, and like as a child, I was like imagining her falling over her bike and like no tears.
I can't cry.
Like,
there's gonna be tears.
And like I still think about that to this day, where I'm just like you look at comedy bits and it's like someone just like, silently turning over on a bike and then just staying there. I'm just like, that's what Allison would be like to me today, where it's just like, where's all the tears? It's like,
I've used them all. They're all gone. Right.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit more, like, I guess a little bit more personal or serious topic. I know you're kind of a little bit open to it, but feel free if you're not, that's fine. But like, I know we have like mental health awareness. We talk a little bit about that, but I want to ask you, because obviously when Big House, but like when Full House got canceled, like you're 13, it's tough. Right. But like,
for sure.
I know you kind of went through this lapse of like, you had alcohol for the first time at 14.
It's interesting because we were kind of talking about it too earlier, and like all of those stupid things that we do as kids. And for those of us who have more of an issue or a predisposition to addiction or all of those things, we start doing those stupid things in like high school, and most of the time it kind of sorts itself out. But for me, it took a lot of my 20s to really figure that out. And again, it goes back to that figuring out who I was outside of the character I played, outside of the attention that I got. And so, for a long time, I think I just didn't quite know who that person was. And so it was like, sure, I'll whatever you've got, I'll try to figure out who I am. And, I think it's one of those things that, again, I know so many people who have gone through it, who were my age, that I grew up with, people that didn't make it out of their teens, who overdosed and things, like people that are in my neighborhood around the corner from me and stuff. And I grew up in a, nice neighborhood, good schools, like, and nobody knew about their stories. Nobody focused on their attention. And so I think what my thing always was with the reason I have always decided to be open about my issues with addiction and alcoholism and things was that we tend to think that it doesn't happen everywhere, that not everyone is affected by this, and that it's just, those fucked up kid stars or people in that business or that. And you're like, no, it's your neighbor. It's the kid around the corner. It's everyone. And when we share those stories, suddenly the families of those people don't feel like they have something to be ashamed of, that it's a failing on their part, that either the person who is struggling with addiction isn't weak or wrong or bad, that sharing the stories about what I've been through and getting sober and like all of the, the really hard things that I had to deal with, I think I've never heard someone I've never regretted sharing it because I've always had someone come up to me and say that it was really important or made them think or helped someone that they loved or themselves. And so I'm like, you know what, as scary as it might be, and as much as I might hate bringing up the past or talking about like who I was, I know that being open and honest and just real about the shit that we all go through is the point of it all, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, like, I don't want to like press you on it, but it's just like,
Oh yeah.
I bring it up because it's a conversation and you want to be respectful to the actor you have on. But like, the reason that I kind of wanted to bring it up, because like, you know, it's rare to have these kind of conversations with people like yourself. But like, I look back at it and like, there was a point in time where, again, like when the internet was hoax and everything was like,
right.
It's like Jaleel White that played Urkel. Like I remember seeing an article where they were like, yeah, Jaleel or like, you know, shot himself. And this was like, and I was like, no, like what? I was like, but in my mind, when I got older, I was like, I can understand that because you're related to this character and that's all you know him for.
Right.
Or when I like, and again, it's before my time and there's going to be people like, great, thanks for aging me. But like the character on like Different Strokes. And I think Howard Stern had her on. And
Dana,
he was like very adamant of like do a drug test, and then I was just like, that's a little bit like much.
It was I think we have moved a long way. We still have a long way to go, but I think the discussions that we have now about mental health and addiction as a mental health issue and not as a personality failing or as like you're a trashy human, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, let's be real. That was sort of, it was a judgment thing. It was like, oh, you must obviously be like a bad person.
Yeah.
And I think now our conversations about mental health and anxiety and depression and addiction and all of those things have come so far that it's like to see someone treat someone who had struggled with addiction like that. Now people would be like, what are you doing? That's not how you talk to people. And so I'm grateful to have been, I would like to think, a voice in that movement of talking about it and normalizing it and moving away from the exploitation of it, the shows, you know, Intervention and you know, Dr. Drew and things like that I you know, Celebrity Rehab and stuff, which I always really had a problem with.
Yeah.
I just think that once we got to the point where we're like, no, this is a something that people need help with, and we don't get to be mean to them because of it, really changed how we have these conversations. And so many people now come out and they're like, yeah, you know, I struggled with this, or my kid or my sister or my, you know, whereas before people would be like, I don't want to talk about that. That's like a family thing that like, oh, we're not going to reveal our secrets. And it's like, well, we're only as sick as our secrets. We're only as, you know, as fucked up as the things that we keep inside that we let eat us alive.
Yeah.
And I just I didn't want to do that anymore. I was like, that's too much.
Yeah. Because again, to be completely honest, like I know we talked about like, you know, saying one thing on Twitter and then saying it to someone's face, right? Like, because there was a point in time that I remember like reading, and again, you're still young, but like you're still like you're in school, so now you got the phone and you're scrolling through stuff. But I remember there's times where it's like Full House star like Jodie Sweetin is like blah blah blah, and I'm just like, man, like I was just like, I felt like it was about to go spiral of the way where it's like I'm gonna wind up one day reading that she's no longer with us because it's taken control. I know you laugh at it now, but at the time you were like, oh god.
I mean, look, it was at the time. It was. I mean, whenever you're in the middle of addiction, it feels hopeless because it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, you know, that you think you're a piece of shit, so you do things that
make you a piece
that make you a piece of shit because you don't have any self-esteem or self-respect, and then you want to have those things but you don't, and then you look at what you did and you feel bad, and then that shame it keeps you back, you know, and you're just like, how do you get out of that? And so many people don't make it out of that because it feels insurmountable. And you know, I just always, I know so many people who have made it through addiction, and I know so many people who have not, so many people who have had opportunity and education and family and haven't made it, and those who have had to struggle and fight, you know, tooth and nail by themselves, and they have. There's no rhyme or reason to what it looks like on the outside, you know? But I am so grateful for all of those things, because once I had like gone through all of that shit and kind of like my 20s were just, you know, messy.
Yeah.
But now also I'm really great at laughing at myself, and thank God, because I've self-deprecating sense of humor. It's like, if I can't laugh about it, then like, what's the point?
Yeah.
So
it's kind of like opening yourself up then.
Exactly. It's like, if I can laugh at something that at the moment was awful, like, then I've succeeded, right? That's success, is being able to look at the thing that you thought was going to kill you and go like, I can laugh at you now.
Yeah.
You know? And so like that, for me, I think being able to find the humor and share the stories and the hope that I've seen in other people, and having worked in drug and alcohol treatment, you know, for a while, kind of in between entertainment jobs, I got to see the light come on for people, and it's what I love, and I love watching that. And probably if I weren't in entertainment, I would have gone back to school and probably become a therapist, or, you know, gone some sort of humanities route, psychologist, like therapist. I love it. I love helping others. And so if anything, like having the platform to share my struggles with addiction and to show people that it doesn't have to determine who you forever will be, that you get to come back and you get to be better, and you get to be different, and that people get to be okay with that. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's just, it's for allowing others to see that, like, it's a process, and you don't just only become that and then never get to grow out of it.
I feel like real people, you probably don't see it like on Twitter and social media, because like that's just a hate pool, but like I feel like real people like success stories. Like, now it doesn't necessarily mean like, you know, like
individuals.
Yeah.
people as individuals are phenomenal. Groups of human beings are atrocious. It's usually like there's like a tipping point where you go like, this is a great this, and then it gets bigger and you go, oh no, now we're going towards all the awful shit. But that, like, the hordes of people online, it's that instant gratification of like, I want the shade and for it. I want to see somebody fuck up. I want to see somebody I don't like have something bad happen. And we're all guilty of it. I do it. You know, there are politicians that I hate, and I like see something, I'm like, ha, but you know, and then I'm like, what is this? Like, and then I'll put my phone down, and I'm like, let me go do something else for a little while, because we all get wrapped up in it. And it doesn't mean that we're bad people. It means that we're people. And like, we don't know how to handle ourselves sometimes. And that's like, no one's perfect, but we need to remember to be kind, because individually, we do like to connect. We do like to hear people be successful. We do like to hear good stories. There's reasons why we watch
shove down our throats.
Right, where you're like, I want to watch happy dog videos all day. Love it. Fucking great. Love the happy dog videos. But like, there has to be, you know, a balance. And I think we find ourselves getting so caught up in like the hatefulness of it, that we have to remember, actually, we really enjoy watching other people succeed for the most part. There are some people out there that don't, but you know, for the most part, we want to hear someone's story and find empathy and compassion, but we can't do that in 200 characters or less. And we can't do that in a 30-second reel. So you only see this little snippet of information with no context, with no humanity, with nothing around it. And I get to make all of my assumptions based on that, you know? And so it's a reminder for me a lot of the time too, that let me take a step back and try and like look at bigger picture, or, you know, because it's a lot.
Well,
it's a lot. I don't think that humans have shown themselves to be able to handle the internet very well.
Well, I mean, in a case in point, like, I know it's probably topical at this point, but like I think it's like Shannon Sharp, like he's like an ex-athlete gone broadcaster. He had the whole media thing of like the Lakers Memphis game, and like, as a person that's in media, that's like, you know, I'm trying to find my way, or at least I was at one point trying to find my foot in the door, and seeing all these ex-athletes take kind of my job. I was like, fuck, like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm not an ex-athlete, but then seeing that and seeing all like the remarks of like, man, like, he's an ex-athlete, he's a piece of shit, blah, blah. I was like, there was a part of me that's like, yeah, see what happens when you hire ex-athletes? Like, they lose their cool. But then when he came out and apologized, like, there was a part of me that sat there like, all right, like, I don't have anything hateful to say. I'm not tweeting. And then, like, there's a part of me that's like, hold on, though. Like, he apologized. How many athletes would come out and say, I am now in this field, I have to do better? And I'm like, at least he's acknowledging it.
Right. All I ever ask of people is to just like do better. You know what I mean? Like, just like, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to act like assholes. We're all going to say something stupid. We're all going to do something wrong. Let us all remember to give each other the grace of a little bit of forgiveness at times. I mean, there are unforgivable things for sure. You know, I'm not looking to like, you know, follow Kanye or anybody like that. But, you know, but I think that we need to remember like that the world is a much bigger place than we see in the palm of our hand.
Yeah. It's difficult to like, you know, kind of separate it, because I know like there are certain people out there that I probably don't like their views on things.
Of course.
But like their music. Like I had this, I'm not opening this can of worms on this show, but I'm just like, it's funny because years ago when I had someone on, we were having the debate of music, and I was like, man, I can listen to Chris Brown. Doesn't necessarily mean I don't like his actions towards Rihanna. I can listen to Rihanna, but like then there's people that are like, well, no, you got to pick one. I'm like, why can't I like their music? Like,
well, I think we're all trying to figure out what is
right.
each of our own moral compass, and what are the things, and also what are the things that we could do for ourselves? Does everyone have to do them? If everyone doesn't do them, but you know, it's all big philosophical questions that are much bigger and much more important than anything I can possibly.
There's a gray area. Like, listen,
life
like
is all gray area.
Yeah, like I can listen to "Run It" by Chris Brown, and that's way before a time frame of what he did. But I'm like, now recent stuff, I'm like, okay, like, you know, if I like the song, I like it. But if someone comes up to me like, can you turn that off because I don't like it, I'm not going to be like, you have to leave. I'll be like, you know what? That's fine. I can listen to this in my own time. That's cool. It depends on what you value in that person. Yeah.
Right. I think we all. And you know what? I myself, like, life moves really fast right now, kind of going back to that social media and all of that. When I think back on growing up in this business as a kid, it was all just a lot slower.
Yeah.
Things took their time a little bit more, and we don't have, and we need that time to like stop and think and reason our way through our responses to things. And we don't do that as much anymore. And we don't give ourselves the opportunity to do that in our own lives. And I think one thing I have learned to do through sobriety, through getting older, through all of that is like, just try and pause when agitated. You know what I mean? Like, just give it a moment. And sometimes it wins out. Sometimes I'm like, I'm just going to walk away. And then other times I'm like, no, I'm not going to walk away. But at least being cognizant of it and aware of it, you know? But yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that we got to talk about that and have some major philosophical questions.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Jodie Sweetin for coming on to the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying thank you for listening, and good night.